Welcome to Art Lessons and Whatnot. Whatnot, and today I'm going to be starting off with some basics of drawing. So, it's going to be kind of step-by-step, my drawing process at least, and hopefully you learn something from it as well. First, I'm going to open up a fresh page of my sketchbook. I use this sketchbook. It's like a mixed media, right? No, it's a pencil sketchbook. Yeah, pencil sketchbook. That one's mixed media. I have a lot of sketchbooks, so I forget easily. Make sure the camera's angled right. It sort of is. Alright. Actually, I'm going to keep it there because I can just, yeah. Okay. This is like the first time I'm doing this, if you couldn't tell already. So I'm just going to bring the camera on the tripod to here. Zoom in a little. Let me move my desk calendar out of the way real quick. A little bit crazy, but here we are. Alright. Make sure you have, whatever materials you need. I usually just stick to my colored pencils, which, let me check the brand real quick because I don't actually know what it is. It is, I use here, Derwent lightfast colored pencils. Got them from my grandfather, who's also an artist. Very good at it. He does impressionism. It's amazing. But, yeah, so let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is, grab your pencil. I prefer mechanical, but whatever you want is fine. All pencils are great. In fact, honestly, you can make art with any materials. There are some people who still use crayons, and they make masterpieces. So, but we're going to start off with the basics. So today we're just going to be learning how to do kind of like, if you're learning how to draw like a person, you want to get good anatomy, like something like this. I drew that on the inside of a tissue box. Or, generally like, and not just the anatomy of a person, but for instance, yesterday I made this, and that glass has anatomy to it. You just don't, it doesn't have the same anatomy as a person. So, a lot of people will tell you, a lot of people tell you to use something like this guy here. The little, anatomy dummy, the mannequins, they help you get, they help you get all the, all the right proportions and everything. Personally, I do not prefer to use these. You can feel free to. There's nothing wrong with doing it. I like the sense of freedom and kind of like choosing a pose as I go instead of working off of a basic reference. Now, reference images are a thing, though, that are great. I love using references. Helps me so much. But if I'm drawing like a character, I usually like to just kind of do it freehand. Because, and I think that's also just a thing of like visualizing. So, let's start off with just the basic. I'm going to draw a character, or like a person, I guess. And there are a lot of methods. There's the, there's the stick figure method where you just go like this. And it's all just about getting basic shapes. So this is one method that I learned when I was first starting out, but I find that this can be limiting. And, obviously you would add your, start to flesh it out. But I know that just takes a lot of time, and then there's a lot of erasing going on afterward, and it gets in the way of your main character. So then another thing you can do is working on a similar thing is doing three-dimensional shapes. So let's say you have a character, or like a person you want to draw, right? And you have this stick figure. But what makes up what, like, a human person's arm is? Cylinders. Entirely just cylinders. So you put a cylinder to this, you fit different things like that. You can fit, like, different shapes and sizes into there, and so like that. And that helps, right? Because then you can have, like, you know, you can say, like, oh, that's a sphere, and then you can flesh out, you know, like, there's your cylinder here. And you get this kind of, like, you know, more natural kind of feel to it. But the problem with this is that, again, it takes a lot of time to be, like, you know, going off of something like the stick figures and things like that. But I do recommend it if you do like to, you know, do that. Like, use whatever method you want. But what I find helpful is just doing something, you know, basic. Like, you have your reference, you find the head shape, right? So let's say this is our head shape. Which is a pretty basic thing. Another way you can do it is by drawing a circle and maybe like a trapezoid. Okay, maybe not that long of a trapezoid, but you just increase the size of the circle, your trapezoid, and then trace around it loosely and erase the excess. And there you have a human head. But this is generally the shape of a person's head. And then you just draw these lines. These are very helpful. If you don't know what these are the kind of face markers. They block out where everything goes in the face. And then when you're finished that part of things, you can kind of get into doing, you know, fleshing out the actual face of it. Let me erase that. But yeah. So like that. And there's one artist I like to, you know, watch a lot of his videos, Scott Christian Sava. And what he does that I really like is when he's drawing a person's eyes, he doesn't draw them the shape that you see them. He draws a full circle like this. And then, because the eye, like the human eye, is a sphere. That's why it's called the eyeball. And then what he does from there is he goes around it. And he fills in all the stuff. And you're like, wow. All of that just from drawing the circle, and now you have the full eye shape. And you can tell where everything's supposed to go. Because, like, there are spaces in your eyes that aren't just, you know, white space. So you want to make sure that you get the exact shape. But, yeah, so then another thing you have to take into account, though, for drawing people is just looking at, like, how, like, one thing that I do is I associate shapes with other things that are similar shaped. So a person's forearm, for instance, kind of comes inward. So what I see that as is I say, that is a cone. And then you put, you know, like a cylinder on top of it, and you get a forearm. And then the hand is just like basically a square. And then you just add like some circles up top, draw the fingers, whatever you want to do with that. And yeah, and that's like the basics of it. The elbow, you can, if you want to, you can draw like a circle in there. And then the forearm's kind of just like, it's like an oval on an oval. And it just kind of comes in like this. And then you can fill in, you know, your gaps. You always want to have that kind of sharp elbow, depending on the style, obviously. And then you go around that, and you got yourself an arm. But, yeah, so, like, you can practice that, just kind of drawing out, like, the basics of it. It's, if you really want to boil it down simply, it's like 4 shapes to draw an arm. It's triangle, kind of like a rounded triangle here for an elbow if you want to do that, and then it's an oval. And then for the hand, it's just like a square for a placeholder. And there you go. There's your thing. And then you can you know, let's say I want to get in a fist, you would draw 4 circles up there. And we'll cover hands later, but yeah, that's the basics of it. Alright. For torso, honestly, it depends. Because, like, let's say your character's wearing armor. And, you know, you have this, like, torso and you want it to look like it's wearing armor. Again, that was a bad example, actually. I'm sorry, but, like, you know. So let's just say, yeah. But, like, I guess armor, you would have the, you know, you would split it down the middle for proportions. And then you'd be like, oh, well, I want the thing to have, like, I don't know, armor, you know, usually has, like, the aggressive, like, chest plate thing with the pecs. So you would do that. And then you would have, like, you know, draw whatever you want down here, abs, whatever, and then add your shading. And boom, like, there you go. And then connections to the arms. Again, using this is actually very helpful as a reference, though. So, like, you always, you know, want to go back to your roots. Don't, you know. So, like, again, there's nothing wrong with the stick figure method. I personally don't start with it, but I use it as inspiration for my own methods. So, I take the inspiration of this section here with the, like, the joints being circles. And then you can add in your arms like this. And then, you know, I don't know what this pose is. It's just like, I guess it could be like, somewhere on like a throne, and they have their hands like this. You that, and then there you go. For like the waist and hips, I would just go with like almost like a. It's hard to describe what it is. It's almost just like a cone that's been cut in half. But it's basically just this. And then you add your little like joints here. And for like the thigh muscles and stuff and like the anatomy of that, it's basically you just want to draw an oval. And then another oval underneath that. And then knee is usually depicted as like, sort of like a hexagon or something like that. I like that because that is kind of the shape of a kneecap. I don't actually know what a kneecap looks like, but I've seen, you know, that in a lot of kind of stylized art styles, they usually depict it like that. So I go with that because it looks good. And then the calves, those are the fun part of things for some reason. They like complete the leg. If you're drawing a person, it's like an oval, and then it's kind of like a forearm with the oval here. And then when you want to connect the foot, it's just that. I'll get to the foot in a little bit, but so yeah, let's just add that in. And with practice with this stuff, you'll be able to really like start to look at like when you're watching something on TV or it's like a superhero show or something, pay attention to how they animate, or like, you know, how the person's like kind of like their arms and legs, their limbs, everything is shaped, how it moves, everything like that, because that helps you get a better understanding of what it should look like in a still position or in the pose that you want, things like that. So then I'm going to move the sketchbook up a little bit so you can see it better. So there you go, there you have that. I'm going to finish this leg here. But yeah, so one thing though, I'm going to go back to this part of things, the thigh, is that you have to remember it's basically a big oval. It's almost like a person's head, and then another little oval that kind of comes out of that one. Again, knee is the hexagon, and then calf, and now we're gonna get into drawing like a foot. I'm not gonna get into like specifics of like adding, you know, like if it's barefoot or in shoes. I just keep it as a placeholder shape, and then I usually just add shoes or something to it because I'm too lazy to draw all the details of like a person's foot. So I basically just go like that, connection there and there. This is basically like there's this and there's this going on in the beginning for the first part of the connection here. Then you want to have this sort of like, here, wait, it's hard for me to do this. Like, okay, here we go. So you basically just want to have like this, comes in like a downward slope out that way. And then getting perspective is so difficult for me for some reason. It's also, for me, I feel like feet are difficult. I usually just opt out of drawing them if I have the chance. But if I do have to draw them, it's usually just a like solid brainwave of just randomness until it looks right. But okay. So basically it's just like a triangle and an oval and they connect. So just look at it like this. And that's the entire shape. It's just that. And I'll draw them separately so you can really see them. Top part, back part, connect equals that. And then from an angle, from different perspectives, so I'm going to draw them, one of them like this, and one of them being going on a different side. I'm going to erase this piece here and just move it over to the rest of that so that I can make room for the main drawing. And another thing that I like to do is, and weirdly enough, a lot of this stuff, I don't know why, because I never actually watched the show or like any of the things from it, but I learned a lot of anatomy stuff from just looking at like Superman, like the animated cartoon series. I think it was probably from like the Justice League series on Netflix. It was animated. It was Justice League Unlimited, I think was the one that I watched. I was very little, but I remember like they did their like crazy proportions on the stuff. It was like this was like a leg, and then you had like that. And then they would do all this like wacky stuff with this. And that was it. That was what I remember from it. And they had the knees, obviously. They poke through. And that was what they had. And so that's another way, though, to remember how anatomy looks. And you just smooth it out and it looks reasonable. But so that's a way that you can remember how to draw like a foot from like face on, is going like this. You draw your triangle, connect it to your calf, and then you just add in the heel and ankle kind of pieces, and it just kind of smooths into this wonderful little mixture of, you know, a foot. But yeah. And then obviously, you know, for the head, honestly, I've noticed recently I haven't really been drawing people with like showing the neck in the drawing. I couldn't tell you why, but it's just a thing that I kind of forget to do. But yeah, so that's basic person. And then, yeah, so now we're going to get into hands. Hands are fun. Okay, so basically, a hand like this is broken up into like one shape for the basic starter of it. It's a square. It's basically just like looking at like a square or like a post-it note, right? And then if you want to draw the fingers, you just start with 4 circles and then another one for the thumb. And the thumb you want to smooth into it. And there's a reason for that. I will explain that later. Actually, I'll explain it right now. Basically, you can see here, like right here, it comes in on both sides, and the thumb kind of pops up out of that part. And so it's not like the rest of them where they just kind of are jutting up and out. It kind of smooths up like a pile of stuff. I don't, bad analogy, but yeah. And so then, you know, you add your fingers, which for a thumb is basically 2 shapes. That, kind of like a smooth rectangle, and then this weird sort of half, like, or 3/4 oval. So it's that. You want to make sure that this side is flat almost, and then comes up over to this side a little bit. You see how my thumb doesn't just go straight line, it goes bump and then back. Bump, back, and then that. So you want to make sure you have that included into your thumb, right? So, little bump and then back away from it. And that's the 2 or 3 shapes, whatever you want to say it is, for the thumb. And then for the rest of the fingers, they're basically cylinders, but there's little details in there that you want to make sure you're capturing. So for that, you go like this. It's kind of, again, that same like rounded rectangle. I'm going to be using that a lot because, you know, humans were created with a lot of rounded rectangles. But another thing that works to our advantage is this. You see in the skin folds right there of like you bending your finger a lot, you get this, which works for when we do the kind of crossing between hands, is it creates that automatically. Yeah, so it like kind of creates that automatically when you cross the 2 shapes. And it's pretty perfect. Another thing that you have to take into account is that, like, for instance, since the middle finger is set higher up than the rest of them, and it's just generally longer, you want to make sure you capture that. So if you do really want to, this isn't needed, but if you want to, you can do this to position everything properly. I choose not to, but if you really want to, you can. I'm just going to scribble this, put a question mark, because it's whatever. But yes, then right now it's not really looking like there's much of a difference, even though obviously there should be. So I'm going to fix that pinky real quick by just kind of moving it down. And there we go. So now we can add the last piece, which again is this kind of weird, like, it's kind of like 2 bumps. If you look closely, it goes boom and then boom, but it's very subtle, so you don't really need to worry about it too much. But so that's the general shape of it. I'm going to erase that though, so you can add the last shape into here. And then, you know, for this part, you're going to want to erase those little circles if you're looking for like a, you know, realistic. And you know, for this sake, I'm going to keep them in there actually, just so you remember them if you want them to be there. But the next thing is that you got to remember is that there's this kind of thing. So you want to put that into there and like show the different things like that. I'm going to erase this a little bit also. So I'm going to keep it there lightly, but not a ton. But then you want to look at, like, how, if you want a realistic hand, for, like, hyperrealism, you want to get, like, these kind of lines from the folding of your hand. So, like, keep your hand out like this. And notice how, like, your thumb has this little, like, thing around it. And then like down here on this part, there's this. And this thing here, there's like, I have, you know, some like rough spots as well, personally, on my hands. I don't know, you know, it's not the same for everyone, but you always want to make sure that you're getting those kind of things. And then from there, connecting it to your wrist is just as simple as like that. And you add the extra details and whatever. I'm gonna wipe those like that, and then boom, and there's your hand. If you're drawing it, you know, in a fist, that's where these little circles up at the top that I have you guys draw come in handy, because you just, you know, redraw your hand, and then look at your fist when it's pulled up, you know, the bumps for your knuckles, and that's what these 4 little circles are. And then obviously you want your thumb, which is going to come up. So that's going to be the first thing you want to add, though, is your thumb. And the great thing about it is that you can see here that, like, it's just perfectly straight lines. And then you want to get that little circle up there for that. And there you go. Then you have your index finger, middle finger, which is going to come up here, that, ring finger, and then, yes, you get your ring finger, and then you get your pinky right there. Perfect. Add your, you know, little details inside if you want. And there you go. Again, it's just square, 4 circles, well, 5 for the thumb, and then up there if you want that. And if you really want to, you can even put the 4 down here in, like, you know, this and this. But one thing to take into mind is that your fingers bend at 1, 2, 3 places, and they come in like this. So when you have your fist like this is the part that you might be seeing, or this. And so, you know, take into mind that you're going to have this and this and this showing probably, but you don't see the underside, like your fingertip on the outside part. That comes tucked in here, unless you hold your fist like that, which, yeah. But so, yeah, so that's how you draw a person's anatomy. And now we're going to move on to part 2, which is anatomy of objects.